Thanks, everyone. Let's make a start. And for those at home who will be tuning in, I apologise in advance for the slightly late start, but we've had a few technical issues that we hope we're on top of right now. Good evening. I'm Mayor Patrick Hall from the City of Canning. This is the agenda briefing of Tuesday, the 8th of March, 2022. And we're making a start now. It's just on 10 past 6. Declarations. This agenda briefing is being held by electronic means in accordance with Clause 14 of the Local Government Administration Regulations 1996, and owing to the current state of emergency and public health state of emergency in response to the pandemic caused by COVID-19 declared on 15 March 2022. And I now declare the AB open. In accordance with the state government COVID directives, I'll be removing my mask and already have done so to speak and chair this meeting, to ensure the communication of this meeting is clear for those who are hard of hearing and for those listening at home on our live stream and may be relying on clear communication. We acknowledge the Whadjuk people, the traditional custodians of the land, and we also pay our respects to elders both past and present. Tonight's meeting is for the purpose of asking questions and seeking clarification on agenda items for the ordinary council meeting. No decision making or entering into debate is to occur at this meeting. Agenda briefings are public meetings and any information you provide may be publicly accessible. This electronic meeting is being live streamed via the city's YouTube account. In relation to disclosures, the prescribed disclosure requirements apply to meetings that are convened under the provisions of the Local Government Act. However, it may be perceived as ethically unacceptable and at odds with the probity and accountability principles of the Act and codes of conduct for elected members to participate in forums, briefings or workshops where they are aware they have a conflict of interest and do not declare it. In the interest of openness and accountability, elected members are encouraged to always disclose a conflict of interest where they are aware that they have one when attending a forum, briefing or workshop, and where applicable, remove themselves from the room while that item is being discussed. At attendance at item 2 this evening, we've done a roll call just offline. I'm going to do it again just for the sake of the meeting. Councillors, I'll just ask you just to reply with a present or a here after I call your name. Deputy Mayor Kunza.
I am present.
Thank you. Councillor Mark Bain.
Present, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Lindsay Holland.
Present.
Councillor Jesse Jacobs.
Yep, present. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Steve Parkinson.
Present, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Sarah Sabiri.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Hardeep Singh.
Present, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Amanda Spencer-Teo.
Present.
Councillor Craig Sweeney.
Yes, good evening.
Thank you very much. And finally, Councillor Paul Tuchek.
Present, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. All present and accounted for. Thank you, councillors. Apologies at 2.1, there are none. Leave of absence, there are none. Disclosures of interest. We do have a number of disclosures tonight. I'm going to ask the CEO to actually read those to the meeting. CEO Stephen Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, loud and clear.
Thank you. We have declarations of interest tonight being a financial from Councillor Bain in the item 30-005-22. The nature of the association being his house on one of the properties in Montrose Street, Linwood, that is recommended to be included in the draft local heritage survey.
You're breaking up fairly badly there.
You.
You're breaking up badly there, CEO. Might want to just check your connection to your laptop.
Can you hear me at all?
I can hear you, just breaking up badly.
Yep. That's the technology. I think we might be getting feedback in the room.
I'll just get you to reread that. So it's Councillor Bain for CD.
Councillor Bain for CD 005-22. The nature of the interest being his house is one of the properties in Montrose Street, Linwood, recommended to be included in the draft local heritage survey. We have declarations of impartiality from Councillor Hardy.
I might jump in there, CEO. You're coming in and out. We can't understand you. Apologies for that. I'll take over if you don't mind.
Okay.
Declarations of impartiality have come from Councillor Hardeep Singh in relation to CO 001 of 22. The agenda page number is 115. The item is a motion carried at the AGM of electors, CCCTV partnership program. The nature of the association, these are impartiality declarations, is that Councillor Singh voted in favour of the motion, and the motion was moved by his sister, Dr. Pawinder Kaur, who is also a resident and ratepayer of the City of Canning. Councillor Singh has also made a declaration, a disclosure in regards to EN 005 of 22 on page 94. That also is in relation to a motion carried at the 2022 AGM of electors. The title of that was in relation to the naming of the public area of Shelley Foreshore, and his declaration is that he voted in favour of that motion. Councillor Amanda Spencer-Teo has made a declaration also of impartiality in relation to EN 005 of 22, also on page 94. In the same matter that Councillor Singh made a declaration, that's in relation to the potential renaming of the Shelley Foreshore. The nature of the impartiality declaration is that Councillor Spencer-Teo knows Melissa Leakius, the daughter and executor of the estate, and she has had discussions with her on this item. And that is the extent of the declarations at item 3. Question time for the public. Responses to previous questions taken on notice at item 4.1. Responses to previous questions taken on notice will be noted in the ordinary council meeting agenda. 4.2, questions from the public. Question must relate tonight to an item listed in the agenda paper. If an answer cannot be provided at tonight's meeting, the question will be taken on notice and an answer will be provided at the ordinary council meeting. I'm going to open a public question time. Obviously, we're doing things a little bit differently tonight. I'm going to announce that we're opening public question time at, say, 6:17 p.m. We're going to be reading these questions and then I'll be asking the relevant director to actually provide an answer. The first of the questions have been received tonight from Mr. Steve Walker of Farnham Street in Bentley. Their questions in relation to the adoption of local planning policy LP16. The item is CD 006 of 22. Question 1, in the time since your delayed public consultation on proposed policy LP16 closed, which was June of 2021, how much money from uncollected public open space contributions of 10% in cash has the City of Canning gone without in Rossmoyne, Shelley, Bentley, St James, in brackets from the demolishing and subdivision by new owners, investors and real estate agents? Director Bride.
Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Mayor, but I've just got a message from a member of the public. They're saying the YouTube isn't up and working, and I'm just testing on my other computer and it's not there. So it doesn't look like we're actually live streaming to the public.
I've got the same as well, Mr. Mayor, that we're not live streaming at all.
Okay, we'll just have a look at it. Are we audio live streaming in the way that we normally do, Karen?
No.
I'm just going to turn my audio off just for a moment, councillors. Councillor Spencer-Teo, we've got Karen Cornish is advising that she can see that there are a number of people tuned into YouTube and are obviously watching, but you're saying that they cannot hear or they cannot see or both?
They cannot see, and I'm on the YouTube link now that's on the website, and it's only got the February meetings listed there. It hasn't even got today's ones listed, so I'm not sure what's going on there, to be honest.
Just stand by. But can they actually hear the audio, or they can't?
No, they're not. They can't even. They're doing what I'm doing and following the link, and it's not even there to click on.
So there's not a link on the YouTube?
Not for tonight, no.
Not for tonight. Okay, just stand by.
under your content, you'll have meetings and you'll have live.
Councillor Spencer Teo, I'm being told that there should be under your content there should be a button that says live. They need to click on the button that says live.
Oh, I can see live. Best
Yep.
of YouTube. No, that's just something else. It takes me to a completely different screen.
Do you want to, Karen, you want to put those on? And I'll unmute myself and you can, I'm not muting now.
Councillor Spencer Teo.
Yeah.
Okay, if you're on our YouTube page.
Sorry, I've just got out of it. Just give me a second. Sorry. I'll go back. So I'm doing this from, and I'm assuming everybody else is, because that's what we gave them, the link on our page that's got all the agendas and everything on it.
Let's have a look on the playlists. Okay, the live one is not showing under that playlist. If you went to the content or all videos, I'm not sure what from your end what you will see, there should be a content. And then there's content is listed on the very left-hand side.
On our website, or are you talking about in YouTube?
In YouTube.
Okay, sorry. Yep. All right. I'm back in there. No, I don't have content here.
Do you have all videos or your?
I've got home, explore, short subscriptions, library history, watch later, linked videos.
Okay. Did you navigate to the governance canning page from the city's website?
Yes, and I'm clicking on that link that says to. Let me just get back into that, and I think that might be where everyone else is trying to get in from.
The two people that have contacted me have gone on to the link that was supplied by the city.
Yeah, so council meetings will be live streamed on YouTube. To watch this, simply follow this link. So I click on that and it comes up with 4 meetings, but it's only got the 24th of February, 15th of February, 8th of February, and the AGM. It's only got the old recordings. It's got nothing current or live.
Which was the 2nd of February, isn't it?
Okay. So we just have to navigate it a slightly different way. So over on the left-hand side, you should have a menu, and it may say library.
Yep. I've got library.
Okay. Does that bring up all of governance?
No, it just brings up history, watch later, playlists, which are the 4 meetings that are already there, and linked videos. That's it.
Just going to see if I can get a link to this live. Get share of link. Copied.
Unless could they subscribe to Canning, and maybe that doesn't make a difference.
It's because I see a different menu than what somebody else will see, because I'm managing the actual channel. But I know when you get to all the videos, you'll have a heap of videos, and then you'll have a live button as well. When you click under the live button, it'll be all the ones we have done live, including what we are streaming now.
Yeah, if I just go to live, it just comes up with all these random, obviously, videos that are streaming live now, but nothing from us.
Even if we find a different way, like going to live or going to whatever, that's not going to help the members of the public, because they won't know how to do that, will they? So they need to be able to access it through that link that we told them they could access it.
Yeah, if you can continue the meeting, what I'll attempt to do now is on the side, I'll see if I can change that link directly to this particular live stream and see if that works. I'll test that. Okay, I apologise. But if you can just stand by for a few minutes, continue your meeting, and I'll log on through the website and adjust that.
Can I,
Mr. Mayor, did you go on Facebook? And a couple of people have tried that through yours and it still doesn't get them there either.
sorry about the delay, councillors. I think in the absence of a clear solution right now, we're going to keep moving. So just so you know, we may not be live streaming right at this moment, but what will happen is obviously worst case scenario, it is only an AB, but worst case scenario, this link will be on the site for tomorrow, which used to be up until 12 months ago. Our process, people will be able to listen to the audio. It is being recorded. We're just having some difficulties, but we are still trying to sort it out here, and I'm hopeful in the next little while we will be able to put that live link up.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, it's Warren,
Yes.
Director Bow here.
Hello.
There is a icon on the landing page. If people scroll down and they click on the governance canning, and there is a G next to that icon, which brings up the relevant meeting.
Amanda, you're on mute.
Yep, I can
Councillor-
see it now, but it looks like you've got to be subscribed to it. I couldn't
Director
see it
Bowe?
before until I subscribed to it.
No, if you click on it, mine's taking me to the agenda briefing for the 8th of March, and then I can click on live, and there I am.
How do you do it again? So I can put it through?
Can you see? I don't know if you can
Warren?
see it.
Yeah, after you land on the page via the city's website, you can scroll down and you'll see a governance canning descriptor with a G icon. If you click on the G, it will bring up the agenda briefing electronic meeting March 2022, 6 p.m. and then you click on the live.
It'll bring up what?
After you click on the governance canning G,
Yeah.
it will take you to the landing page. It will say agenda briefing, electronic meeting, 8th of March 2022, 6 p.m. If you just click on the icon that says live, it brings us all up.
That does work.
All right, I'll see if my people, a couple of people that are trying to get through can do that.
Works for me.
Yep. Director Bright, I read a question to the meeting from Mr. Steve Walker a little while ago. Are you able to provide an answer to that first one, or did you want me to read all three questions first?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy just to answer them after each question is asked.
Okay.
Response to question one, the number is likely to be low. However, the city will investigate and provide a response before next week's council meeting.
Thank you. Question two was, estimate how much public open space contributions monies City of Canning has missed from not having an appropriate contribution mechanism, in brackets, for example, 10% cash, in regards to demolition subdivision in City of Canning residential suburbs during the 1990s, 2000s, 2010s and 2020s. Note you can ignore the Canning Vale residential subdivision. Are we able to provide that level of detail?
Yeah, through Mr. Mayor, the city's public open space strategy adopted in 2015 represents the strategic direction in relation to open space provision. The state government's Development Control Policy 2.3 requires a local government to identify a shortfall in an adopted strategy before it would impose a public open space condition. With the increases in density accommodated by the new scheme, which was adopted in 2020, this has unlocked significant subdivision potential. Therefore, the timing to consider the policy is appropriate.
Thank you. And Mr. Walker's final question is, why the delay of 4.5 years between the city's finalisation of the 2015 public open space strategy and the 2020 proposed policy LP16 to deal with public open space deficiencies in those 4 suburbs?
Yeah, in response to that one, that's provided in the answer to question 2.
Okay, thank you. We have now further questions from Carolyn Little of Rossmoyne. Questions also relate to LP16, CD 006 of 22. Question 1, given Rossmoyne is approximately 2 square kilometres in size, the foreshore runs the entire length of the suburb over 3 kilometres, and the following parks are located within the suburb, being Yagan Park, Creekview Park, Sandra Playground, Massey Street Park, Anne Way Park, Lyons Park, Rossmoyne Park, Kiwinas Park, Fifth Park, Lundy Park, and City of Canning Central Park. How can the residents of Rossmoyne not live within 400 metres of public open space?
Okay, the residents within, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The residents within Rossmoyne have adequate access to public open space within 400 metres. Some suburbs have gaps in accessibility, but this is not the case in Rossmoyne when considering the river foreshore. The deficiency identified for Rossmoyne in the public open space strategy is around the level of POS provision for the population.
Thank you. Second question, if there is a need to increase public open space, why doesn't everyone in the council contribute, i.e. all households?
Response, Council has previously adopted the public open space strategy, which identifies that efforts should be made to increase open space in a number of suburbs where a shortfall exists, using in part contributions from the land use planning system. Given there is a relationship between an increase in residents as a result of subdivision and the provision of infrastructure, such as open space, a contribution as part of the subdivision is considered reasonable and is aligned with the state government planning framework.
Thank you. Question 3, why are those selling small subdivisions of 3 lots in the nominated suburbs forced to pay? Is this not a very unfair approach that is going to hurt retirees, as subdivisions into 3 lots is not normally done by developers?
Response is landowners that have the ability to subdivide and develop their property are directly contributing towards the need for additional open space, since the requirement of open space is directly linked to population.
Thank you. Councillors, I'll just remind you again, if you don't mind, can I ask you to please keep your video on, unless you really need to turn it off. Question from Alex Munnett of St James. Questions regarding, again, CD 006 of 22, the adoption of local planning policy LP16. This appears to be a compulsory acquisition of our property by stealth without adequate consultation with the landowners. This is highly questionable and a great disservice to the ratepayers you are supposed to serve. There has not been adequate consideration or consultation. When is this going to occur? The legality of this proposal is suspect. The harm to the trust of the council is immense. That is the question.
The response, there is no compulsory acquisition associated with the policy. Any contribution would be applicable only at the subdivision stage where 3 or more lots are proposed. As per paragraph 42 of the officer's report, the policy is consistent and aligned to state government planning policy. And as a subdivision process is within the remit of the state government, the West Australian Planning Commission will determine whether to apply a condition to this effect based on the city's recommendation.
Question 2, is the council going to adequately consult with the affected ratepayers? or do we need to seek to again throw out the councillors and get representatives who are willing to perform their responsibility with honesty and integrity?
Okay, the city has undertaken consultation directly with the affected landowners. All landowners who have been identified as being affected by the draft policy were invited to provide comment during the public consultation period. A total of 1,144 letters were sent to each affected landowner in the suburbs of St James, Bentley, Rossmoyne and Shelley.
Question 3, doesn't this land grab at least require a vote or referendum, actually allowing the landowner to decide?
As per the response to question 1, regarding the notion of compulsory acquisition, the POS strategy was advertised for public comment and adopted by council in 2015. So the whole strategic base of this policy was developed through the public open space strategy. The draft local planning policy was also advertised, as I mentioned, for public comment and is before council for determination next week.
The next set of questions are from Mr. Stephen Johnson of Parkwood. Questions also relate to CD 006, the adoption of local planning policy LP 16. Question 1 is, in what way could it be considered fair that a minority of ratepayers selected arbitrarily based on suburb boundaries should subsidise the majority of ratepayers to mitigate poor planning decisions by council planners presiding over the entire city? Director Bride.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Landowners that have the ability to subdivide and develop their property are directly contributing towards the need for more additional public open space. Since the requirement for public open space is directly linked to population, it is also noted that the city, through its new local planning scheme, has upcoded many residential areas of the city, which has led to increased property values and further subdivision potential for many landowners. With this additional infill accommodated by the planning scheme changes, a contribution by the subdivider where 3 or more lots are created is considered reasonable and again in alignment with state government policy.
Thank you. Question 2, I don't see any projected outcomes in the briefing. What is the expected net gain or loss to council income, including both the levy and the lost income from the likely fewer subdivided properties in 3, 5, 10 and 20 years following introduction of the policy? It goes on to say how much public open space is projected to be purchased with these funds in those same periods.
Okay, the requirement to consider increasing the level of population in a local government jurisdiction is driven by state government planning strategy, Directions 2031 and beyond. This strategy outlines through sub-regional structure plans the requirement for every local government in the Perth metro area to increase housing diversity and population in order to achieve infill targets. Therefore, in order to comply with this direction, the state government, the city is required to review its local planning scheme to ensure areas are appropriately rezoned to accommodate infill development. The city's local planning scheme 42 was recently approved in 2020 by the Minister for Planning. It is difficult for the city to speculate on property value increases and or decreases, as this is not a typical planning consideration. However, it is a common understanding that increasing the residential density code of a property, say for example from R20 to R40, thus allowing a property to be developed from 1 dwelling to 3 or possibly 4 dwellings, often results in the property value increasing considerably. Accordingly, a 10% contribution towards the provision of additional open space needs to be considered in the context of the change in zoning and the likely property value increase that has resulted.
Thank you. Finally, it says that the city has grouped the following comments under general comments providing no objections. Those being that the submitter strongly opposes the policy in its current form. The submitter suggested to drop the proposal altogether. The submitter totally disagrees with the draft and a raft of other comments. How could these comments possibly be considered no objections?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The city is happy to receive further information on this issue with the submitter number quoted, and if incorrectly categorised, we can amend the schedule of submissions for the ordinary council meeting next week. Okay, terrific. Thank you. The next set of questions are from Mr. Ron Baines of St James. Questions also relate to CD 006 of 22, adoption of local planning policy LP 16.
Question 1 is, as a result of charging 10% of the land value, in brackets, example property sold with land value of 800,000 equals $80,000 charge, close brackets, will this devalue the property to the sum of 720,000 in the eyes of the buyer developer, causing the mum and dad investor a great financial loss in the autumn years when this money was planned for downsizing or selling? End of question.
Okay, response. There are a number of costs associated with the subdivision of a property, whether they be headworks charges or contributions. There is a requirement in Western Australia to contribute either 10% of a land holding or provide an equivalent contribution towards the cost of public open space as part of the subdivision of residential land. As mentioned in responses to previous questions, the city's policy is in alignment with the state planning framework, and a purchaser will undertake due diligence in relation to subdivision costs, noting that this may be factored into the selling costs of the resulting lots. As noted, the city, as part of the Gazettal of Local Planning Scheme 42, has upcoded a number of residential areas, which has increased property values and allowed many landowners to generate a higher subdivisional yield than that was available in 2020.
Question 2, is the Canning Council working for the ratepayers or the ratepayers working for the council when at the moment ratepayers in St James are being forced to pay $2,500 for modified street lighting, being told to expect a rate increase of 6% over the next 3 years, and then being told that effectively their property is, if subdivided, in the future will lose its value by 10%. Is the council working in the best interests of the ratepayer? End of question.
In respect to the 10% contribution requirement for public open space, the city has identified St James already has a significant deficiency in public open space. With the residential densities identified as part of the recent local planning scheme number 42, this deficiency will be amplified as the number of residents per hectare of open space will continue to fall well below the state standard of 3.36 hectares per 1,000 residents. As per the recommendations of the public open space strategy, residents and ratepayers in St James will expect the city to provide equitable access to public open space that is available in other suburbs of the city.
Thank you. The last question is, the Canning Council sent out a brochure months ago asking for public comment. I attended the next meeting following this letter drop, was not given any opportunity to discuss the policy, as it was more important to discuss breach of confidentiality within the council. I'm not absolutely sure what that means. Everybody has an opportunity to ask a question anyway. Next, I emailed my concerns re the 10% land value charge upon sale of property if developed. Next, I hear you are not having a public meeting on the 8th of March due to the state of emergency. Next, I'm told to fill in this form and my concerns are viewed. Next, I am told you will make a decision and let ratepayers know via the website the outcome of the final decision following a meeting to be held on the 15th of March with the results posted on your website. The question is, in view of the importance and ramifications financially on your ratepayers, particularly the mums and dads who work so hard their entire life, for the Canning Council to prove transparency, honesty to the ratepayers of their region, shouldn't this policy be discussed when ratepayers have the opportunity to attend Q&A sessions, future meetings when ratepayers can meet Canning Council face-to-face, full stop? Director.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Due to the rapid spread of COVID-19 in the Perth community, a decision was made to hold council meetings virtually for the foreseeable future. This is to prevent large gatherings of people in the council chambers, putting at risk the spread of COVID-19. The city's report, inclusive of a schedule of submissions, capturing feedback from the community, has been published as normal, and the city has facilitated the ability for residents to ask questions on the public record, which is being facilitated tonight and via the council meeting next week.
Thank you. We move to Mrs. Ann Johnson of Parkwood. Her questions also relate to the same policy, proposed policy being LP 16, item CD 006 of 22 refers. Question 1, Council has recently made planning changes that intend to encourage infill development in order to responsibly cater for an increasing population. Do you accept that you would contradict this intent by introducing a policy that will strongly discourage infill development by making it less financially viable? Full stop.
The city has, through the introduction of its new local planning scheme in 2020, upcoded the residential density areas of many suburbs in the city of Canning unlocking subdivision potential that wasn't available previously. Contributions to public open space as part of the residential subdivision process is a key component of the state planning system, as outlined in policy DC 2.3. The city already has an adopted public open space strategy, which recommends the utilisation of the land use planning system to receive contributions for areas where shortfalls exist. If the policy is adopted and it is known to landowners or investors, this cost can be taken into account early in the process.
Thank you. Question 2, is there any reason to believe that the funds from this levy will ever be used to purchase significant additional tracts of land, public open space, rather than simply buying new playground equipment that would be more properly be funded from the general rates?
Response, the main focus of the contribution is to acquire land to expand the amount of public open space, particularly in the Bentley and St James area where there's a significant shortfall. Upgrades to public open space can also be funded from these funds, as outlined in paragraph 9 of the officer's report.
Thank you. Question 3, the briefing includes no mention of financial modelling of the impact of the policy. Why?
Response, the city has identified a number of scenarios where funds can be accumulated.
Has none been performed, or is there some reason for keeping it from as full stop?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The city has identified a number of scenarios where funds can be accumulated and used to acquire additional public open space in the affected suburbs. The scenarios show that even if the policy is operationalised in full, that means all the money is collected and used to purchase land for public open space, there will still be a shortfall in public open space, albeit reduced due to the policy. The city is required to set up separate reserve accounts for each of the suburbs affected by the policy so that it is transparent and that the money collected from each suburb will be accumulated and spent in that suburb. This information would be available in the city's budget papers for public consideration and accountability.
Thank you. The next set of questions and the final set of questions are from Leanne Baines of St James. Question 1, regarding public open space policy, this will affect mum and dad ratepayers in terms of reducing the value of their property by 10% in the eyes of buyers, developers who must pay the 10% when doing offer acceptance, thus affecting their financial retirement fund. Have the council considered this financial impact on ratepayers? Full stop.
Many of the properties impacted by the proposed policy have seen increases in density as a result of the scheme. This in turn would have allowed these properties to have greater subdivision potential and therefore higher land values. The 10% contribution needs to be taken in context of the greater development potential afforded to landowners under the new scheme.
Question 2, this matter impacting ratepayers so heavily, this matter should go to a referendum and be made more transparent to the ratepayers. Can we please have a referendum so all ratepayers can be inclusive on the final decision? Full stop.
The provision for a 10% public open space contribution is already implemented through the Western Australian Planning Commission DC 2.3 policy. The city's draft LP 16 provides guidance on when the city should seek a contribution. Without this draft policy, the city could still demonstrate to the Western Australian Planning Commission that there is a deficiency in certain suburbs and request the WAPC to oppose a condition requiring a contribution. A referendum is not normally considered as a tool of engagement in the preparation of a new planning policy.
And the final question this evening, when a single dwelling R40 property is developed, it will attract up to 3 times more rates. So couldn't these additional rates not be put toward public open space funding as a fairer way of raising funds? Full stop.
The additional rates will need to be spent on additional services for the new dwellings, including additional waste services, additional infrastructure, maintenance and administration. So that pool of money needs to be spent on a number of services, not just POS.
Thank you. There being no further questions, I'm going to close public question time now at 6:50 p.m, notwithstanding we had a number of technical issues that elongated that period. So thank you to everybody for their patience. Deputations, we have a number of deputations. A deputation has been approved by Mr. Daniel Sadik regarding confidential item CC 010 of 22, the proposed sale of 24 Magnet Road in Canning Vale, lot 60. I will read Mr. Sadik's deputation to council. Councillors, it's in relation to a confidential item. Governance and the CEO and others have determined there is nothing in this deputation that makes it confidential and it should be read. Good evening, Mayor Hall, councillors, interim CEO, staff and guests. My name is Daniel Saddick and I am representing my father, Albert Saddick and Derbury Proprietary Limited. Thank you for the opportunity to introduce our family company and support our offer to purchase 24 Magnet Road in Canning Vale. My family own the property adjacent to 24 Magnet Road, and we would like to tell you a little about ourselves. We have owned and run a nut and bolt manufacturing business in Canning Vale for the past 30 years. The owner of the business is 92 years of age and still works full-time. He is driven to work by his 78-year-old brother-in-law, who also works in the business, together with younger generations. We also own the 4 warehouse factory units, which we lease to other small businesses. Within the family, we have over 30 years of relevant experience in the development field, including project management, architecture, civil engineering, building management, accounting, finance, and marketing. We are also fortunate enough to have significant financial reserves within the family. Very simple, but very strict philosophy. We never take advantage of people. We recognise and strongly believe that all people must have opportunities to provide for their families and loved ones. We are civic-minded people and we want to do well by the Canning community. This is very important to us. In regards to the proposed use of 24 Magnet Road, we plan to design and construct warehouse factory units very similar to our existing development. If you wish to see an example of what we propose for the property, please see next door to our architect designed existing warehouse development at 7 to 13 Bell Street in Canning Vale. Should we be the successful proponent, we plan to begin the design and construction of the development sooner rather than later. We completed the construction of a similar sized project in Kewdale in 2021, demolition to reopening in 6 months. Finally, we believe that supporting our offer places 24 Magnet Road in a safe pair of hands and ensures a completely predictable development that will support the growth of businesses within Canning Vale. Thank you for the opportunity to address council to support our offer to purchase the land. Regardless of the result, we will endeavour to do the right thing by the council and the community of Canning. The second deputation is from Nancy G. That's J for Juliet, I for India, Nancy J.I. Of Success Motors Services Proprietary Limited. The deputation is also in relation to the same property, and that's item CC010 of 22, being the proposed sale of 24 Magnet Road in Canning Vale, being lot 60. I'll now read the deputation. Good evening, officers. I would like to thank you for this opportunity to address the committee. We are a family business from Success Motors Service and currently operating in Boston Road. During the last 6 years, we have served in Canning Vale along with employees who are also local residents. We've been dedicated to delivering a quality service and great customer care to our local customers. We are proud to see our client pool increase over the years as our customers recommended us to their friends and family. Hence, we would really value this opportunity to expand our business and continue to thrive. If we are lucky enough to have the offer to purchase 24 Magnet Road approved, we are planning to build a brand new workshop with an office front and brick-layered warehouse. We will also focus on building green landscapes, installing solar panels to be more environmentally friendly. If you can please kindly consider our offer to purchase the land at 24 Magnet Road, it would be greatly appreciated by our local employees, customers, and us to thrive as a local business. End of deputation. Thank you. They are the only 2 deputations we have. At item 5, items brought forward for the convenience of those in the public gallery. I think that's an item we could probably take off for the next AB governance. Item 6, reports of committee meetings. A report from the Audit and Risk Committee held on the 2nd of March will be listed in the ordinary council meeting agenda for next Tuesday. Item 7, reports. Reports at item 7.1 from the Chief Executive Officer. There are none. Item 2 from the office of Mr. Warren Bowe, the Director of Canning Corporate and Commercial. The first item is CC009 of 22. The item is tender 07 of 2021, cleaning services at Cannington and Riverton Leisureplex. The recommendation is on page 4 of the agenda and is on screen. Councillors, are there any questions on that matter? And just on that, I'll just need you, Councillor Holland, I still have your camera off. Can I ask you to please put your cameras on, councillors, so I can see you? Otherwise, if you ask a question, I don't know what's going on. Hang on, I've just lost everything.
Is my camera on now?
It is now, Councillor Holland. So you've
I'm
just got
going
that.
back to have a look at the agenda. So that's the only way I can work it.
Okay, you should be able to. So I can see the agenda on my screen, and you're just a little thumbnail at the top right-hand corner. And I think that would be probably true for, you can, like I said, reduce it. But in any case, just stand by. Are there any questions, councillors? I'll just get you to actually just call out. Councillor Sabiri, yep, sorry.
Thank you. I've got a few questions. On page 5, this is a tender one, correct? On page 5, it talks about specified personnel. This also has the lowest weighting. Can you please tell me what that represents?
Director Bowe. Director Bowe?
Yeah, certainly, Mr. Mayor. That asks the respondents to identify who the people that they employ will actually be performing the contracts or performing the requirements of the contracts. Often with consultancies or things like that, the specified personnel weighting is much higher. The intention is for the city to be able to readily identify, particularly for consultancy, who will be doing the large proportion of the work and to ensure that there's a suitable level of seniority assigned by the company to undertake the work. The reason why the specified personnel weighting for this tender is less is it is not as critical to identify who will actually be performing the requirements of the contract on site. In this particular instance, the cleaning duties.
Thank you. My second question, page 9, it talks about outsourcing of cleaning staff. So sustainability commit 1 discusses improving the presentation and hygiene of leisure places with particular focus on meeting customer expectations and to reduce risk during the COVID-19 pandemic. Outsourcing the cleaning allows supervisory staff to improve the focus of their attention on other duties to improve customer experience. Was wondering, does that mean that supervisory staff were carrying out cleaning duties? And,
Director? Sorry.
And also was wondering, if not, how many staff we have carrying out cleaning duties, and are they on contracts?
Mr. Mayor, I'll answer the first part of the question first. Not necessarily, we didn't have supervisors per se undertaking cleaning duties, but we did have other duty officers who had a mix of duties, including the operation of the leisure facilities at Cannington and at Riverton. And some of the staff also had requirements to undertake cleaning duties. So there was a mix, and the intent of outsourcing the cleaning was to enable the separation of those duties and to enable our leaders and duty officers to focus more on the operation of the facility rather than have to undertake cleaning tasks. The second part of your question, Councillor Sabiri?
Was whether they're on contracts, I believe, or
yes, I guess you sort of responded to that, saying that there was a mix, or were there also just cleaning contractors as well, or were they, I guess, permanent staff at the city?
Look, there previously was a mix, and some time ago we undertook all of the cleaning services at both leisureplexes using in-house staff. We commenced a trial back in late 2020 to see whether the separation of duties would work, to see whether the service levels that we could elicit from the market, from the cleaning contracting market, would be able to be administered to deliver the responsive cleaning. It certainly worked in providing after-hours cleaning, and it certainly worked in enabling our staff to focus on more centre operational duties rather than cleaning.
Councillor Sabiri.
Yeah, sorry, I was muted. And one more question. Another commitment we have is commitment 3, and it talks about commitment to responsible resource management and impact reduction. Does the city have a guide, I guess, to provide, I guess, the best minimum and best practice performance information and procurement responses for the engagement of service providers? How do we, I guess, how do we figure out that this is good? Like, is there a list? Do we have a guide? How do we come to a conclusion that they're sustainable?
Director.
Certainly for this particular contract, Mr. Mayor, we undertook a trial which lasted well over a year. And we're not only measuring the financial sustainability of the ability for cleaning services to be delivered, but what I'll do, Councillor Sabiri, is I'll have a look at the evaluation report and try and extract some data in relation to that. But as far as a direct answer to your question, do we have a guide? We don't necessarily have a guide, but we will be developing an impact tracker and using that to assess a number of the tenders that we put out to the public, put out to the market to just see whether we're going to meet sustainability principles as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sabiri. Thank you, Director Bowe. Any other questions on that item before we move on? Councillor Bain.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of questions. In extension of what Councillor Sabiri's question, will outsourcing of the cleaning at the leisure plexes result in any savings to the city? And secondly, will any existing employees lose their positions? Thank you.
Director Bowe.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'd rather not comment in relation to individual employment arrangements, but the trial that we undertook back in late 2020 and the cost benefit analysis and the assessment of the cost to deliver cleaning services via in-house, a mixture or outsourcing would indicate some significant savings for outsourcing, Councillor Bain.
Thank you. Any further questions, Councillor Bain? Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I had some questions on that as well with the outsourcing. Could you define what you call significant savings? And I do think that it's a relevant question on if people have lost their jobs, because we go on how many each year since I've been here on how many people have been employed by the City of Canning and how many have been outsourced. We've outsourced a lot of positions now, and just wondering why we're going down that path of outsourcing as opposed to permanent staff.
Director Bowe.
Well, firstly, I didn't say it was irrelevant whether staff lost their job. I said I would prefer not to comment on individual employment arrangements. If staff staff would be who undertook cleaning previously at the facilities would be the subject of consultation, have been the subject of consultation, and will be the subject of any requirements under our employment agreement in relation to redundancy. But that is a matter that's not for the public domain. And I would reiterate, and I can provide a written response to all elected members regarding the potential quantum of savings that the full outsourcing of cleaning services at the Leisureplex will deliver.
Councillor Holland.
Will that level, thank you, Mr. Mayor, will that level of savings portray the difference between, like you can use statistics in a lot of ways. You can say, right, we're going to save $1,000 a year, as an example, we're going to save $10,000 a year, but it's going to take us 20 years to pay back the redundancy that we have to pay out. So will you give us that information as well when it actually is a cost benefit?
Director?
Yeah, I'm happy to provide all the relevant information under confidential cover to the elected members, bearing in mind that we have transitioned a couple of staff already during the trial to other roles within the city at the leisure plexes. And we've also done, since we started the trial, an analysis of the cost of delivering those services. And I can say that the evaluation of the tenders that were submitted and the recommended tenderer actually delivers a further saving on those that were derived when we started the trial of outsourcing the cleaning services. But I will provide that those figures in writing.
Anything further, councillors? Thank you. We'll move to the next item then, which is thank you, Director Bowe. CC 011 of 22. The title of the item is late item, monthly financial report for February 2022. The officer's recommendation is on page 10 of the late item agenda and is on screen. There it is. Councillors, any questions on that matter? And I will ask you just to actually unmute yourself if you'd like to ask a question. So just so you know, once we put an item document on the screen, I then have reduced visibility of the participants. I can only see 5 councillors at the moment. So there you go, you're all back. Does anyone have a question on the monthly financial report? Councillor Holland?
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, but when you do that, then I haven't got the motion or whatever it is on the screen, so I lose that.
We might go back to it. Stacey, can we go back to having the recommendation on screen? I think what we just need to do is, if you have a question to ask, don't feel like you're being rude, just unmute yourself and just ask me to pose a question. I think otherwise I won't be able to see it. Have you got a question you would like to ask?
Yes,
Councillor?
there was something with money paid to Curtin of $19,000 and just under 12,500 to the City of Stirling. Can just have a bit more information on that, please?
Have you got item numbers for those two?
Not in front of me now, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, okay.
Because I can't access it.
Director Bowe, do you know those off the top of your head, or are you able to provide
I certainly don't know them off the top of my head, Mr. Mayor, but I'll touch base with Councillor Holland, and he'll no doubt be able to provide me with the direct warrant listing item, and we'll provide that in writing back to him.
Are you okay with that, Councillor Holland? I'll get you perhaps just to email that through, and we'll get a response from the director.
No problem.
Thank you. Any other questions, councillors, on the item before we move on? As I said, just unmute and ask your question. None. Thank you, councillors. We'll move on to the next item. We're moving on to CC 012 of 22 Whaleback Golf Course Concept Plan. The recommendation is on page 16 of the agenda. It's also on screen right now. Are there any questions on that item?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Holland, go ahead.
I've got a few, so you're going to have to bear with me.
Yeah, that's okay.
I've been going through this a bit and looking at things. Now, look, I had a look at the, whatever you call it, the draft layout design. Do you remember it?
Concept plan.
The concept plan, the design. Now, there's a lot of things in there which I find that they're flawed badly.
Well, hang on.
Now,
flawed. When you say they're flawed badly,
in my opinion, and
your opinion,
like I said, I'm happy to be proven wrong. We've got the 1,100 square metres. I can't see how that's going to be enough space to locate a big part of the range and have it as a two-storey building, to be honest. Problems with its location and the plan, you've got an extreme lack of vehicle access for delivery of stocks, goods, so on and so forth, rubbish removals and so forth. You've got no vehicle access at all. The mini golf where it's going.
Can we just ask one at a time, and we'll get the director. So I'll just rephrase your question. Your question is the 1,100 square metres thought to be adequate for the services on that site? Director Bowe?
And how do they get vehicle access?
Director Bowe?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. The 1,100 metres, Councillor Holland, you're referring to the area for the cafe and the food and beverage offering?
That's a yes.
And your query as to whether that's too little or too much?
I don't think it's enough. But the major concern is where are you going to get vehicle access from?
Well, we see vehicle access coming. You see where item 14 is in the car park? There's an opportunity for vehicular access to come through the central spine of the facility and would come down right down past the playground, which is number 3. But I can ask for a greater level of detail regarding vehicular access. I take your point about how we're going to get deliveries to the cafe or the bar, or service vehicles. Yep.
Look, it's not only service vehicles, but from what I can see there, you haven't got access to emergency vehicles either. There is no access. If you have a look at that, the way that's depicted there, there is no access. But so I've made that point. So have a look further on that. Now,
how do emergency vehicles get into the driving range at the moment?
Because they've got the gates are open up down the bottom. There's double gates down there that they can get in there, which comes out down near where the scouts are and things like that. They've got other access as well.
So that would continue though under the current concept plan. That wouldn't be prohibited for accessing it via that route as it stands. But I can get some more information for you.
Yeah, please do. Now the mini golf, where the mini golf goes, that floods. That's a flood area. That's actually a flood area.
And the question, the question is,
I just need a
considered,
question.
the hydraulic requirements of the site to cater for storm events?
But the lake
the answer's basically yes, but not to any detailed design. No.
That area where you've got the mini golf does flood.
We're aware of that, absolutely, and we will ensure that any subsequent design or detailed design truly takes into consideration the hydraulic capacity requirements to get from the lake through to item 6 there to
the river
to the northeast.
Now, what worries me, if you're going to have major flooding, which it happens 4 to 5 times a year down there, I've got a real problem how the living stream is going to be able to handle that. That'll overflow as well.
Director Bowe, has that also been factored in? Can I just ask, the concept plan at the moment, how set in stone is that? I mean, is that pretty much signed off? That's what you're proposing to take to market?
It's not, no. Maybe next week, if council resolve to endorse it to test the market, it would gain a greater level of solidity. But it is simply a concept plan. The architect is aware, and certainly through numerous discussions with the operator, I'm sure elected members were made aware during the site visit themselves. The city is aware that the site floods. The city is aware that the site performs a significant drainage function for the Canning Vale Industrial Estate, and numerous times a year there are on-site remediation requirements made by the current operator. It's currently a concept plan. Any major redevelopment of the site would require detailed design, including detailed hydraulic investigations and design works, including in conjunction with the Water Corporation, to ensure that we weren't inhibiting the drainage function that runs straight through that site. So we're aware of it. It's not the point in the project that we engineer the solution to the drainage requirements of the site. But I will just say again, we're aware that the site does flood from time to time.
Okay, good. That's good. What about where the mini golf goes? Besides it being in the flood zone, you're going to require significant fencing and high fencing to stop the balls coming from the 14th and 18th holes.
Yep, and that has been conveyed to us in the consultation. And since that concept plan was put onto Your Say Canning, particularly design feature 07, I think, which is the practice putting green, Councillor Holland. So those comments are noted.
Well, it's a main one because there's a couple of holes. The 9th hole is one that's gets hit with the driving range, and I think, what is it, the 14th?
Sounds like they've been Sounds
the
like
other
it's
way
been raised
and
though.
the 18th coming back as well. So there's major issues there. The fence, I can't see how you can have a fence go up as high as you're hitting a 6-iron.
Yeah, Councillor Holland, again though, this is just a concept plan. It's only the
I know,
concept.
Mr. Mitt.
So
I realise
it
that.
sounds
This
like
is
they.
the forum.
Yeah.
This is the forum for me to bring up any ideas that I've got.
No, it's not. This is not a.
It is a question. I'm questioning the thing.
Well, you haven't asked a question. You're providing your own version of how you things won't work. This is question
I am
time.
asking how it will work. How do we stop the balls going on the mini golf? Okay, put it like that. How do we stop a 6-iron ball going on the mini golf? No fence is high enough for that.
Yeah, we've already got issues with the driving range fence, and that's why some of the costings to protect other users of the facility are so high, because there will be a requirement for safety fencing, and there will be a requirement in a revised concept plan to relocate item 7 on that concept plan that's there on page 22 at the moment. So those comments and questions are noted, Councillor Holland.
Okay. Another question. How does someone from the car park, an elderly person from the car park who uses a buggy, one of the drive buggies, get from the car park to where you can get the buggy to the pro shop? It's a 300-metre walk, and the reason they're getting a buggy is because they can't walk. It's a 300-metre walk. There's only one way. There's only one access. How do they do that?
Well, how do they get from the current car park to go and pick up their buggy at the moment, Councillor Holland, if the car park's full and they have to park to the very northern east extreme of the car park?
That's rare. That is a rare thing. And I asked the question, Mr. Bowe. That's not to be answered with a question.
Okay, tell you what, Councillor Holland, I'll pull you up there. I think we need to be respectful. He can answer your question. He's trying to. He's made what I think is a relevant comment. That situation could occur right now. You've asked how they would get there, and he says, well, it could happen right now.
Well, the fact of the matter is the overflow car park at the moment is not used very often. That's a fact. The other fact is most of the people that come down there, that are the elderly people, for example, or who can't walk very well, tee off earlier in the day when the car park is not full.
Mm-hmm.
That's a fact. Therefore, they do not walk 300 metres. They do not walk anywhere near it. They probably walk 100 metres from where their cars are parked. So the car park gets full later in the day as opposed to 8 o'clock in the morning.
If they have specific access issues, Councillor Holland, they may be able to access an ACROD sticker, which would enable them to park a lot closer. But it's a fair point. I don't know the answer to your question, how people who are infirmed or have access issues travel that distance to go and play a round of golf.
The funny thing is with the ACROD stick placements that they've got down there, I think there's 3 of them. Yeah, they're used, but most people that do have the buggies, they're not actually ACROD holders. They're people that are just getting older and do not want to walk 9 or 18 holes because it's just a bit far. That's all. It's not actually meaning they're ACROD.
Okay. Any further questions?
What about the green staff? How will the green staff have direct access to the 10th hole from whence they're coming from, either the 18th or the 9th?
Director Bowe?
Sorry, I missed that one,
How
Mr. Mayor.
will green staff have access to the 10th hole if they're coming from the 18th or the 9th?
Green staff.
I'll
take that question on
greenkeepers?
notice.
Councillor Holland, your next question?
How is the access going to be, which I can't quite work out, which you might be able to explain to me, if you're getting your cart from the 9th tee to the 10th tee?
Councillor Holland, how many more questions have you got to ask?
Doesn't matter,
I'm happy to take them on notice, Mr. Mayor, because the internal pathways and the internal access ways between one tee to one green or for one green to the next tee is not the domain of the concept plan. So I'm happy to take those questions and to take them on notice, to engage with the architect. But to be perfectly frank, I don't think we're going to answer them at this stage of the design of the Whaleback concept plan. But they're all reasonable questions, and the actual functionality and how the internal movement of the golf course and the users of the golf course is a strong consideration, but it hasn't been resolved at the current concept plan stage.
Okay, yeah, that's fine, and I think that's what you have. Did anybody discuss the concept plan with another person who's running a golf course?
Director Bowe, did we?
Yeah, certainly. I've discussed the concept plan with the current operator of the Whaleback Golf Course personally, and he pointed out a couple of these things that you have as well for us, Councillor Holland. Hence, that's why I've got some degree of awareness of those ones. But the consultants that we've engaged have, as you would have seen from their SIB presentation, have worked with I think the City of Wanneroo and the City of South Perth and dealt directly with operators of golf courses, and they have some experience in that space, yes.
Did they actually deal with South Perth with Collier? Were they in the actual design and implementation plan when Collier was expanded from 18 to 27?
I don't know that detail, Councillor Holland. They certainly have been working with the City of South Perth, but I don't know whether they were involved in transitioning their course from 18 to 27, but I'll provide you with some information on that.
I don't know much about the people at all. I'm just wondering, have they been actually involved in development of golf courses?
Some of this might be best taken offline, Councillor Holland. I mean, we've got I'm not sure that these are really relevant asking.
Yeah, they're not golf course developers, Mr. Mayor, the consultants that we've got, but they will be engaging with the market who either operate or manage golf courses. They're certainly not in the design space of golf courses, and we didn't engage them to design the golf course. We engaged them to take the feedback from the community engagement, to identify the key tenets that the community told us they wanted to see in the redeveloped Whaleback facility, not just golf. In fact, everyone's aware that it's a more than golf concept. So that's why we engaged those consultants. We're not redeveloping the 18 holes. There might be some modifications to a couple of the holes, and certainly the location of the practice green, the pitching area, and the mini golf will have to fit in with the broader operation of the 18 holes.
There's no problem with moving a little bit around as long as it works. Another question. I'm trying to see what sort of return is the city going to want from this financially. I'm trying to get the figures to add up, and I'm not getting 2 + 2 here at the moment, but I'm not an accountant either.
Director Bowe, is that a question you're able to answer?
No, it's a question. I can't give any clarity on the quantum of return. What I have put in the report is what we currently receive. What I have put in the report is the likely quantum of investment we'll be seeking from the market, and how the market responds and what return that they would like to see on their investment. The city will need to consider what return we receive as a result. But I don't know, I haven't pegged any figures on what the city might return to its Whaleback Golf Course reserve on an annual basis, other than I've put in what we've averaged over the last 4 years.
Yeah, I saw that. Thanks for that. Well, my concern, which I'll pose it as a question, when you do an investment like this and the private consortiums, would they or would they not, they'd expect a return, yes?
You appear to be on mute.
Yes.
Yes. And whatever the development the city undertakes through whatever form, the city will expect a return, yes?
A return of sorts, but I haven't pegged that being entirely a financial return, Councillor Holland. There may be some other community benefits. There may be some other investment by the market in some other community infrastructure elements that the council may wish to see, as opposed to that net financial return. But again, we're well ahead of that decision point. And when that decision point comes, there'll be further briefing, there'll be a draft contract, and there'll be the key terms, which will be the subject of council endorsement before we move to the next stage of procurement.
The last question I've got, which will please you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, it will.
Is the drop-off zones. They're actually quite away from the pavilion.
Your question?
Yeah. Is there a reason why the drop-off zones are so far away from the pavilion? The drop-off zone is supposed to be drop-off close to wherever you're using a shopping centre.
The drop-off zones are a reasonable distance away from the clubhouse, the bar and the cafe and the driving range, but the drop-off zones are very close to the proposed community hall. The drop-off zones are close to the other community elements, including the playground and the multi-use courts. The drop-off zones can't be close to everything, but I take your point earlier, Councillor Holland, about the travel distance from the car park to the golfing facilities more centrally located on that site.
Am I right in saying that there is only one access point from the car park, isn't there?
No, there's two. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Councillors, just to advise, just for the sake of the record, I'm informed that the meeting is now being run live as it should be. Apologies for those who weren't able to join us right at the beginning of the meeting, but I will repeat that the full audio of this meeting will be available, and the YouTube will be available tomorrow for all of those. And we have spiked at 8 people watching online. Any other questions on this item?
I have a question, please, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And for the record too, I believe half of those are probably our staff. But nevertheless, thank you to those 4 or 5 people that are joining us. Councillor Amanda Spencer-Teo.
Thank you. Just one quick question. Will any grant funding be applied for, or any advocacy take place during this expression of interest process?
Director?
No, it's not intended to apply for any grant funding at this particular point in time. Councillor Spencer-Teo, we don't have a decision yet from council that they wish to engage with the market. It won't be until I think the response for the tender, if we get to that particular point, we would look at channeling some resources to grant funding. But again, there are already a number of projects that have already started or that are far more advanced in their preparation than Whaleback, which may actually have a greater priority for us to seek funding for.
Right. So sorry, just it was kind of a hypothetical that if we did go forward with this next week, that in that period up until it comes back to council, there will be no work done on applying for grants.
No, there won't.
Okay. Thank you. That's all.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions, Mr. Mayor.
Deputy Mayor, yes, go ahead.
Just to start off with, following on from what Councillor Holland was asking, and Director Bowe basically said the name of the company escapes me, but they weren't expertise in golf. Are they responsible for the massive changes from what was presented to council in December to what has been presented in February?
Director Bowe.
And the massive changes in actually the concept plan?
They're certainly the architects responsible for transitioning the spatial plan into something that is more workable, that is more coherent and tries to draw people in who wish to participate in the golfing activities, and also presents the more community-facing elements closer to the outside of the facility without having to go particularly into the golf course.
Deputy Mayor?
But just to clarify, how does that actually take into consideration the functionality of the golf course and the current users? Is it simply coming up with what they think from the community perspective and then taking on board what golfers say?
Well, the golfers were quite clear that they wanted the course, the 18-hole course, preserved. The golf industry identified the investment in mini golf, that and the spatially fitting that in required in the concept plan the relocation of the putting and the pitching area. So yeah, the considerations of the golfers have been made, but again, it's not only they are one stakeholder of this project. Council endorsed some time ago the more than golf concept to engage with the community to try and transition this facility and open it up to more community, and that's what the consultant's brief was, and that's what I think they've delivered in the concept plan.
Deputy Mayor?
Just on page 17 of the report, paragraph 4, it basically says in early 2018, in the face of declining patronage and along with the need to replace aging course infrastructure and facilities, a project to establish a master plan was commenced with an aim to meet future community needs. It then goes on page 14 of the report, basically says that the Whaleback Master Plan 2018 indicates that the Whaleback Golf Course operated at near capacity for traditional golf use. If that's the case, why do they not contradict each other? Why are we looking to invest into golf when, according to your own report, it was at near capacity?
Director Bug.
Yeah, I'm going to have to take that question on notice. The Deputy Mayor lost me with reference to page 14. Is that a reference? Is that the Patch Group report, the attachment count, Deputy Mayor?
Sorry, the agenda, page 17, paragraph 4.
Yeah, then you mentioned page 14.
Page 18, paragraph 14. So the next page, page 18, paragraph 14. The Wellback Master Plan 2018 indicates that the Wellback Golf Course operated at near capacity for traditional golf use.
Yeah, I'll have a look at that and provide a response, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor, anything further?
Yeah, just the June 2020 report, CC 02820, paragraph 10 and 11 basically outlined the potential outcomes for the site, said mini golf, children's play area, new bar restaurant, new multi-purpose courts, place for community events. And the only difference I really see what's now is the inclusion of a living stream and the removal of the land sales. Why has it now got to a point where time is a critical issue that we need to get this moving, because we have to get it done by the end of this year, when between June 2020 and now, I mean, we've basically provided a report on what we were already looking at in June 2020.
Director?
Well, I can only answer that the project came across my desk in the middle of last year. The conclusion of the lease in December 2022 was the key driving factor to have this project moving. And yeah, that's it, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Number one of the officer recommendation is endorsing the community report. I haven't got it in front of me right now. Endorsing the key outcomes of the More Than Golf report. Is there actually a larger document that has more of what the community was saying? For example, the 2020 report outlined there were 9 social clubs, but I don't really see any information as to what feedback was provided to the city, just the 10-page report that's part of this officer recommendation.
Yeah, there was a report published on Your Say Canning, which was the outcomes of the community engagement, Deputy Mayor. Is that the one that you're seeking?
I can only find that 10-page report that basically has that was on the Your Say Canning, that basically has the information, the feedback percentages on what the community thought of the questions that were asked of them.
Right. I'll see if I can find the broader report on that one.
Thank you. Anything else, Deputy Mayor?
Are there any alternatives? Are there any alternatives that, if council doesn't endorse this, that we can potentially go down with respect to the fact that we've got timing issues? We need to make a decision, but given that we have a number of master plans that haven't been enacted, like the Rossmoyne precinct master plan that has caused a lot of angst in that community, nothing's happened on that. This is proposing to build a district level playground, yet we've got a number of master plans that propose that and nothing's happened on those. Is there anything, is there another course of action that council can decide upon that will get an outcome for the city for a new company to run the Wellback Golf Course potentially, but not go down seeking yet another master plan on the city's books?
Yeah, there is. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There is a clear option, Deputy Mayor, and that is that the city simply advertises the disposal of the lease for the facility as is. So that is an option that the council could ask the administration to progress. Simply a disposal of land under similar or terms that the council wishes to put into contract or into a draft lease. So that is an option, yes.
Just on that, Director, my understanding is that the current leaseholder would be possibly agreeable to extending, or the city might extend a month-by-month lease or a 12-month lease. Is that a possibility to get past this timing issue with the December 22 lease expiry?
Mr. Mayor, we don't have any option to extend the lease, but we do have the option to use the continuation or the holding over clause, the current lease, for a short period of time. Or typically a month-by-month arrangement can occur, but that's not something that provides the operator or the city with any certainty, but it's something that we've entered informal negotiations with the current operator about, and he's agreeable to that, subject to council's endorsement and subject to any progress or otherwise with this particular report.
Thank you. I had Councillor Baines' hand up, but Councillor Sweeney, did I see your hand up earlier?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'll go after Councillor Bain. That's fine.
Go ahead, you're speaking now. Ask your question if you like.
Okay,
Councillor Sweeney.
I do have a question for Director Bowe. As you know, the Parkwood Tennis Club, that's been coaching people, kids, adults for a very long time, over 30 years in competitive tennis. The concept plan has a significant impact that I see on the Parkwood Tennis Club. My questions are, firstly, what engagement have we done or taken place with the Parkwood Tennis Club? Secondly, what was their response about the concept plan and the reduced capacity from 6 courts down to 4 courts? And I notice also that there is a recommendation that 2 of the courts are going to be retained, but they're going to be multi-purpose. So I would like to know what the definition of that is. What exactly does that mean, multi-purpose?
Will that be included, Director, in the feedback from Deputy Mayor's earlier question about what about the other 9 stakeholders?
Yeah, look, I've included some commentary under consultation at paragraph 95 about the engagement with the Parkwood Tennis Club. They currently have 6 courts, 4 of which, in their view, are substandard. The proposal is for them to have 6 courts, 6 new courts. 2 of those would be multi-purpose. So what that means is that they're line marked for multiple sports. Currently, as you'd be aware, the Parkwood Tennis Club hire the courts off the operator of the Whaleback Golf Course. Removing that arrangement and enabling those courts to be administered by the city is one of the intentions of the concept plan. Parkwood Tennis Club currently have 20 active members and have been engaged significantly right from the start on this particular project, Councillor Sweeney.
Can I just confirm, did you say 20 members?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Sweeney?
Yes, 20 members, but they're a club that are very, very similar, are they not, to Corinthian Park and to Wilton, who have had significant funding, and they boast 8 courts on each of those premises.
Corinthian Park's got more than 400 members, last count I thought.
Yeah, and they have significant streams of revenue, whereas Parkwood don't. And that has been the problem for this club. So are we looking at changing that, Director Bowe, in terms of revenue streams to bring along Parkwood to be the same as Corinthian Park and Wilton so that they can expand and they can grow? Or are we just going to separate them? Because from the way I see it and the information that I've received from the club, they play pennant tennis just like the other 2 tennis clubs. And I feel that they should be treated equally, but historically, that hasn't been the case. Can you please comment on that, Director Bowe?
Yeah, I can comment, Mr. Mayor. I can comment that the comparison between those tennis clubs that Councillor Sweeney mentioned and Parkwood Tennis Club is stark. The Parkwood Tennis Club are a casual hirer of 6 tennis courts for a number of hours a week. The Corinthian Park Tennis Club are the leaseholder and a self-sufficient club that invested significant amounts of their own money in the infrastructure that they now have the usage of. I don't think there's a comparison, but what we're trying to do with the concept plan is give certainty to the Parkwood Tennis Club that they will have tennis courts in which to operate on over a number of hours and hire from the city for the number of hours they need it each week.
Just my final question then, Director Bay, just so that we're quite clear for the people that are listening at the moment as well. So Corinthian Park and Willetton hire their courts from the city?
No. Corinthian Park lease and manage the courts as far as I'm aware, but I will confirm this in writing. And the Willetton Tennis Club, I think, hire the courts from the city, although they have a lease and usage access to the club rooms and the toilet facilities there at Willetton Sports Precinct. But I'll provide that in writing to Councillor Sweeney and the elected members.
Yeah, if you could, thank you, Mr. Bowe, because there does seem to be an imbalance between these three clubs that, by all intents and purposes, operate the same for the community. So I would like that cleaned up if you could provide that information back to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bain.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Regardless of the progress of the concept plan, will construction of the playground still go ahead?
You're just breaking up there, Councillor Bain. Can I get you to...
Will it be included in?
Councillor Bain, can I get you to repeat that first question? You're breaking up and I didn't hear it. I'm not sure whether the director did.
Yeah.
No.
So regardless of the progress of the concept plan, will the construction of the playground be going ahead, and which budget will it be included in?
Director?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. The construction of the playground is not included in the city's long-term financial plan. So my view is, rather than get ahead of ourselves in considering funding from the city for this proposed district level playground, the playground is a complementary use to the broader more than golf concept and aims to provide another activity or another reason for the community to visit and engage with the broader Whaleback site. But if council chooses not to undertake the market sounding, or if council at a point in time after market sounding chooses not to undertake a restricted tender, then the delivery of that district level playground would be questionable. There is a small playground in the vicinity at the moment. The district level playground concept aims to create another reason to activate and another reason for people to come and visit the site.
Councillor Bain?
Yeah. And are there any trees at Whaleback that have been placed on the significant tree register, particularly in regards to the footprint of the concept plan?
Director?
I might ask Acting Director Johnson, who will be online, if he knows. I don't know the answer to that question, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Johnson.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't believe that there are. There certainly are some trees of significance, whether or not they actually meet the criteria for significance. If you look at the imagery on page 22 of the report, there are some faint red circles that you can see north of the golf course, and they identify some trees of significance. It's just I'm not sure whether they actually meet the criteria for significance.
Anything further, Councillor Bain? Nothing further. Councillor Holland, I saw your hand up again. Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just a couple of quick ones. I'm actually not quite sure if you can explain to me, Mr. Bowe, how the lease is. I mean, the lease runs out at the end of this year. Are we in, if council endorses all this, for example, are we anticipating that all docs will be signed? I know we've got that slight extension on the lease to a month-by-month periodic. Are we expecting that the new operators would take over, say, within the next 12 months?
Director?
I wouldn't think within the next 12 months, Councillor Holland. But bear in mind, after the market sounding, the city, the administration, will present the key terms that have been that evolved from the market sounding, a draft contract for endorsement by the council. And so we're looking at June to July for that. So the council will be fairly clear on what terms and conditions it is going to offer the market. The market will have already been sounded out about the terms and conditions. Mobilising and capitalising, I think, is going to be the critical time frame. But we'd be looking to, if it goes in accordance with the timelines outlined in the report, the back end of this year, the operator, under whatever arrangements and whatever contracts council chooses, will have certainty. How quickly then they can mobilise to move in and commence the operation of the site, we're not sure, but it certainly I wouldn't anticipate it's within the next 12 months. Maybe the next 18 months is probably a more realistic time frame.
That's what I was expecting too. So have we got the right to virtually go on a periodic lease for anywhere between 6 to 12 months?
Director?
Yeah, certainly 6 months has been the period that the informal discussions with the current operator extended on.
Now, with the new person, if they come in with the design that we've got now, will they be able to make any changes to that? For example, I just can't quite work out why we're moving the tennis court and stuff in the car park just to enhance the entry. Surely we could have worked around leaving them where they are and saved a considerable amount of money. Do all the other stuff, but I can't see the point in that.
Yeah, that's something that I think after the market sounding will need to be revisited by yourselves, the elected members. I would anticipate that if we do progress to a restricted request for tender, that we would need to enable some alternative design work to be undertaken by a potential operator. They may have better ideas about how the golf elements of the concept, how the community elements, a better location of the car park to enhance access for people, things like that. But I would think we need something to go to the market to. If the market tells us that the concept plan just won't work, then we would need to revisit that at a point in time, but we won't know. We believe through the engagement of the consultants that we've used and their experience that the concept plan as it stands at the moment is a decent layout, and it does incorporate the key outcomes of the community engagement, and it does meet the objectives of the More Than Golf. But a golf course operator who's going to invest a not insignificant amount of money may have a better idea. So we need to be open to that.
The last one, so we can quickly move on, Mr. Mayor. Have we done a feasibility study on how many rounds of mini golf it was going to require to make that viable?
Director Bowe?
Oh, we haven't done a feasibility study, but we've done a business case, which was included. Some scenarios were included in the confidential briefing paper that was sent out December last year, based on X number of rounds and the return that a certain number of rounds played over a 12-month period may bring to the operator. So we've done some rudimentary calculations, but it's not necessarily a feasibility study. We've looked at other facilities. We've looked at Point Bolter, City of South Perth itself, engaged with Wembley, and done some assessment ourselves of what we may be able to, what an operator may be able to put through that facility.
Any further questions, councillors? Thank you, Councillor Holden. Thank you. We'll move on then. Thank you for that. And if anyone does think of a question, please send them through to Director Bowe. I'm sure he'd be happy to deal with that. The next item is the responsible officer is Mr. Graham Bride, the Director of Canning Development. It's the endorsement to advertise the draft local heritage survey and draft heritage list for public consultation. It's CD 005 of 22. Councillor Bain, I won't ask you to reread your interest, but I know that you've been dealing with staff, and staff have advised you that they believe it to be a financial interest. and that you would therefore will need to leave the room at least via electronic means. So what we'll do, governance staff here will check you out of the meeting. Just stay where you are. You don't need to do a thing. You won't be able to participate. You won't be able to hear what's happening, and you won't be able to see what's happening. But we will plug you back in as soon as we have dealt with this item. I'll just get governance to confirm that that has actually happened. Thank you. Councillor Bain has been checked out of the meeting for this item. Again, councillors, the recommendation is on page 38 of the agenda and is on screen. Does anyone have any questions in relation to this item? No questions? Thank you, councillors. We'll move on to the next item. Governance, I'll ask you to readmit Councillor Bain back to the meeting. We'll just pause until that's done. Councillor Bain, you're back. Thank you. I can see you on screen. You can hear us okay? Councillor Bain?
Loud and clear.
Terrific. Yep. Thank you very much for that short adjournment. We move on to, sorry, I've just lost my place just for a moment. Flip over. CD 006 of 22. The item report title is the adoption of local planning policy LP 16, public open space contributions in residential areas. The recommendation is on page 51 of the agenda, and the two-part recommendation is currently on screen. Councillors, any questions in relation to that item?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Holland, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah. There was something mentioned by Director Bride about the state government saying that we had to do a 10% anyway. Has that been actually mandated by law?
Director Bride, just in relation to confirmation about the 10%.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, we did ask the state government whether we could reduce that percentage to, say, 5% or 7.5% as an option. Certainly their response was, in order to comply with their state government policy DC 2.3, it had to be 10%, otherwise they would not apply it. So if council resolved to reduce that provision less than 10%, the state government would not apply the policy. From their perspective, they apply it throughout the whole metropolitan area, the whole state of Western Australia. So they've got a consistency perspective.
So if they didn't apply the policy, like we could go back and say 5% or 2%. So if they didn't apply the policy, then our 2% would stand. Is that correct?
No, I don't think they'd support it. Councillor Director Bride?
Yeah, no, Mr. Mayor, because the West Australian Planning Commission controls the subdivision process, our role is only to recommend to the West Australian Planning Commission. So if we adopted a policy that said we'll only have a 5% or a 2% contribution, at the end of the day, they're the ones that would have to apply the condition. We don't control the subdivision process. We would only recommend to them. And what they're saying is it's 10% or nothing from their perspective.
Yeah, but they don't apply the condition if we put $10,000 on it. The money comes to us for public open space. Isn't that correct? We take the money, not the government.
Yeah, through Mr. Mayor, yes, that is correct. We would be the receiver of the funds, and we'd have to put that into a reserve account. But we couldn't ask the Commission, and the Commission wouldn't put a condition on that required less than 10%. So if the city started to take funds less than 10% and the Commission became aware of it, we would be breaching DC Policy 2.3.
I'll come to you in just a moment, Councillor Singh.
Well, the question, yeah, I've got a couple more. Well, I can't get my head around this. Why are we discussing this? If it's already mandated by law that the government's going to take 10%, why is it here at council at all?
Yep.
Director?
Yep. So the issue at the moment is under that state government policy, DC 2.3, the city, sorry, let's put on my video, apologies. Under that policy, DC 2.3, the city or local government can request the Commission apply a contribution to public open space. At the moment, the cutoff or the threshold for every subdivision in Western Australia, residential land, is 5 lots or more. But that particular policy says that if a local government has adopted a local public open space strategy, which the City of Canning has, and that identifies a particular suburb or suburbs that hasn't got enough public open space, then the city can ask the Commission to apply a contribution for 3 lots or more. So it brings down the threshold lower if the city can establish, or local government can establish, that there is a shortfall, which we have done through the 2015 strategy.
So we think there's a shortfall in St James.
Just lost you there, Director Bride. Bride, are you there?
Yes, so I've just got the first part of that question. Sorry, you might have to repeat it. Thank you.
Yeah, I hadn't finished it.
Go ahead.
So we've seen there's a lack in St James of public open space. So if we get $10,000 here, or $80,000 there, or $90,000 there, how is that going to help us increase our public open space? Land is finite. Where are we going to find the land from?
Yeah, through Mr. Mayor, the intention would be, again, if council did adopt the policy, and we did get money through contributions from subdivisions, the report that is attached to the agenda identifies, I guess, areas where, especially for Bentley St James, there's areas or gaps in the POS provision. So some areas have got very limited access to open space in terms of a walkable catchment. And those are the areas that we would then focus on potentially acquiring land. So if you take the City of Gosnells, which we referenced in the SIB we had on this matter, they've particularly identified areas in Beckingham, and they've been able to get their land utilisation team to focus on purchasing some corner lots or purchase a couple of lots together. And they've actually turned a number of private properties into public open space. So over time, if opportunities arise and they're within the catchment identified in our POS land acquisition report, we can then go ahead and take these matters to council to purchase land and then increase the public open space in that area.
We wouldn't do it by forcible acquisition, would we?
No, it'd be all done through the private market. So any of those contributions will be utilised to pay fair market value. And obviously, we need the landowner's consent.
The other thing was, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, when I wrote this down, I thought you said it doesn't matter whether the cost, well, you wrote something to the words to the effect that the cost is taken into account early in the process. And so it's dealt with then. I can't see the relevant whether it's early in the process, later in the process, the cost is still there. It's irrelevant whether it's early, late, or whatever. You've still got the cost.
Yeah, the context there was that some local governments don't have a local planning policy. They just utilise the state government's DC 2.3 policy. They've already adopted a public open space strategy, which shows a deficiency for a particular suburb. They just subdivision by subdivision request a contribution. So what we're doing, and what 2 or 3 other local governments have done, I guess, is being a bit more transparent and accountable and adopting a policy so that we get council's endorsement or council's position on whether us as staff should ask for these contributions in line with our public open space strategy. But the issue there was that a lot of developers come to us and say, well, if we have some certainty or some awareness that there is going to be certain costs early on in the process, they can at least program or make decisions around that. The last thing that they like is seeing at the last minute a local government from nowhere requesting a public open space condition and the WAPC applying that, because that hasn't been factored in. So I guess what I'm saying there is that by having a policy in place which is transparent on our website, developers and investors can make their financial decisions based on that information up front.
I agree, that's a great idea. The other thing that worries me as well, it was brought up by some of the questions that you read out, Mr. Mayor, before from the public. How is this not going to hurt mums and dads and make it so that the actual, the redevelopment or the subdividing is actually going to not become viable on a $900,000 lot when there's $90,000 of it gone straight away? Your $90,000 of profit's gone. Director.
Yeah, that depends on obviously the land values. Obviously, land values in some parts of the city are lower than others, so it's 10% of whatever that market value is for that particular suburb. Certainly, the cost of this particular policy is going to have a impact on the end profit. There's no doubt about that. But my view is that, and I guess the Commission's view is, because it's adopted in their policy, is that if there's going to be a wide scale area of further subdivision, so we're getting a lot of more residents coming into the area, if we're already aware that there's a shortage, shouldn't those developers, subdividers, contribute to addressing that issue rather than the city as a whole apply their general rate base to fix that issue?
How do we calculate the rental value? I know you've got the GRV that we do for the rates and so on. So you've got a property in Rossmore and it's worth $1 million as is the land, as is. It's 1,000 square metres, we'll just say hypothetically. So that's worth $1 million. But if you subdivide it, it's worth 1.5. So where do we put the 10% on the million or the 10% on the 1.5?
Yeah, the 10% applies to the million. So it's the upfront Englobo lot size, not the post subdivision valuation. So
if they put 10 units on it and so the value of the property would be 5 million. So it'll still come back to the 1 million they pay the 10% on.
It's the parent lot valuation. Yep, before the subdivision.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Singh. Thank you, Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I would like to start by saying a fact that City of Canning does accept 5% public open space contributions in the suburbs of East Cannington and Queen's Park. So it is not the same policy as what's being discussed here. This contribution is accepted through TPS Scheme 21, and it's been in action for at least more than 5 years I know of. So yes, there are definitely ways to accept less than 10% on public open space contribution.
Do you want to just get a comment from the director on that?
Yeah. No, I think it's important to clarify. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, the Town Planning Scheme 21, which has been established back in the 80s, did initially have a 10% contribution, and it was a guided development scheme over that area. Back around 2008, I believe, that was reduced from 10% to 5%. It was only because at that particular stage for that scheme area, based on the tracking of that of those funds coming in, the city could see that it had enough funds if the ratio was reduced down to 5%. So that was a guided development scheme. It required approval from the Commission back in 2008. It's certainly their position now, and this is a local planning policy. This is not a guided development scheme covering Bentley or other suburbs, is that it has to be 10%. So we did go back to them on that issue because we did get a lot of feedback from the community that said, well, I might be supportive if the ratio would drop from 10 to say 5 or 2. We think 10 is too high. But that was certainly adamant that, it had to be 10% or they wouldn't accept it.
So thank you, Director Bright, through you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
So I do understand technically, yep, there is 5% contribution from East Cannington, Queen's Park, and the guided development scheme, we are looking at 10%. And WAPC has already told it has to be either 10% or nothing. But from a resident perspective, who does not understand all these technicalities, it just looks like 5% is being charged to Queen's Park, East Cannington, and there is a proposal to charge 10% to these 4 suburbs. And then there is nothing for rest of the suburbs on City of Canning. So my question is, how is this fair to City of Canning residents, especially to those ones who have moved into these areas in question over the last 5 or 10 years? And maybe by the time these funds will be spent on public open space, many of those will leave, basically contributing to this specific fund and not reaping the benefits. So why are we not applying the 10% policy, same policy to each and every suburb of City of Canning? I mean, has any study been done? And what is the, let's say, drawback of doing such a thing? Just being fair.
We can only apply it, though, Director Bride, can't we, if there's a shortage of public open space identified in the suburb? Is that the...
Yeah, that's right. So the public open space strategy has done that analysis of all the POS provision across the whole city. And there's only 4 suburbs that have been identified as to having a shortfall. As I said before, in response to some of those questions, a lot of the scheme has only recently come into play, which is up-coded a lot of those residential areas. So a lot of areas around Bentley and St James, the density code has dramatically increased, which has actually led to a lot of subdivision potential right, in the last couple of years. So the timing of this, given we've had these density code changes, this is probably the optimum time. It's either council introduces it now or doesn't, and basically has to come up with a different methodology to fund, or either not do anything or look at municipal funds in relation to acquiring open space.
Councillor Singh.
Director, through you, Mr. Mayor. So there are examples used for other councils who have done a similar thing. Let's take City of Gosnell. Now they have applied this policy to all suburbs. So just basically reinforcing my comment, I understand we are doing this just to force those because a report says they do not have public open space. But that doesn't stop us from applying this to everyone, just to be fair, and use the funds from those suburbs on better development of their public open existing space. I mean, we are not taking funds away from them to any other suburb. Those can be applied for the betterment of those suburbs, but it will help us be fair to every resident of every suburb in City of Canning. So again, I'm not convinced. I'm looking to be convinced. Tell me, why are we just doing it for these 4 suburbs? I understand the concept, they do not have public open space, but that doesn't stop us from improving public open space in other suburbs. So why can't we do for those suburbs?
Yes, through Mr. Mayor, we can only spend money from the areas that we get the contribution from. So, for example, if we were taking contribution from a subdivider in Canning Vale, it would have to be spent in Canning Vale. If you have a look at paragraph 42, the WAPC is very clear that, and they do this across all local governments in Western Australia, you have to demonstrate through a local planning public open space strategy that there is a shortfall, and that contribution can only be relevant to that particular suburb that has a shortfall. So yes, I understand that what you're saying in terms of the City of Gosnells are saying that they collect it for all suburbs, but the reality is the Commission will only apply it, will only put that condition on in that particular suburb if there is a shortfall identified in a planning strategy.
Councillor Singh, anything further?
Director Bride, are we saying that these other suburbs which are not identified for this scheme does not need any money for their public open space development, including improving their parks, improving the facilities in their parks and stuff, because all this money can be used and city can put that as a condition to WAPC. I have done the subdivision myself. My experience, I'm not as experienced as city officers, is WAPC listens to the council. Basically, they say whatever the council conditions are, please go and talk to council. They put all those conditions based on council recommendations. Again, those are recommendations from the council, but in 95% of cases, WAPC honor them because it's the local government who deals with all these things. So again, I'm looking for more information that why we are not doing it for this.
Director.
Yeah, look, I can categorically state in my experience that if the city was to ask for a contribution for a 3-lot subdivisions throughout the whole of the city, it would be a complete waste of time. The Commission would not apply those conditions at all, and they've made it very clear in the past, and obviously other councils that have imposed these conditions, they only apply it if there is a shortage in that suburb. So it can't be used as unless the whole local government authority has a shortfall across every suburb, they can't apply a blanket approach to their own policy. We're only feeding into their policy, and all we're asking through this policy position is, has the staff got the, I guess, permission of council to ask for these contributions? If council say no, then obviously we will not be requesting a contribution on 3 to 5 lot subdivision proposals.
So, Director Bright, again, I'm struggling to understand how come City of Gosnell has that approved from WAPC? How come they applied this to all of their suburbs?
Director Bride, do we know much about the Gosnells' experience?
Yes, I'm regularly in contact with the relevant planning director, Chris Terrelink, and actually he gave us a lot of information, a lot of those photos that we used in the SIB. Yes, they do. I understand they do try to get contributions for 3 to 5 lots everywhere. However, I think that's with very much mixed success. It's only really those suburbs that they've identified as having a shortfall where the Commission has regularly put them on. So they may ask for it, but the reality is the Commission will follow its own policy, only apply it to areas where there's a shortfall.
Okay, one last question, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
In the report on in item number 46, page 56, section C, basically I'll read it out. It says, setting the cut off at subdivisions involving 2 lots would likely impact on the viability of these smaller subdivisions and may stifle infill development. Makes perfect sense. And I completely endorse, yes, that happens. Why are we not considering this for East Cannington and Queen's Park where this is happening? Because this is applied to 2-lot subdivisions in both of these suburbs. And I can give you real examples where developers or even mom and dad or people looking to buy property, they are being pushed to Beckenham, City of Gosnells or somewhere else just because of this 5% POS on 2 lots. So in one policy, we are worried about such a thing. And in another policy, which is TPS 21, we are doing exactly the opposite. So please help me understand, why are we not addressing it in TPS 21?
Yeah, through Mr. Mayor, TPS 21 was based on the whole locality, as you said, of East Cannington and parts of Queen's Park. And the analysis that went into that particular scheme identified the total public open space required. And then it worked out a lot yield and basically that there must be a certain provision per lot. So that was the calculations made as part of that particular scheme. So you're right, if you do a 2-lot subdivision in under that scheme, you still have to make a contribution. So that's a historic scheme and that's been set up. It's very hard to change and modify those clauses in the scheme. If you did, for example, change that scheme to include 3 lots and above, then there would be a shortfall of funds because it's all being calculated back on that in Globo lot yield that was worked out many years ago.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Bride.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Councillor Jacobs. Councillor Jacobs.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I just had to find the button. I've got a few questions. I'll just read it. A quick question. Is it my understanding that if I or someone else decided to construct in one of these 4 suburbs, just decided to construct 2 500-metre blocks in such a way that they cannot be cut into 250-metre blocks, would then they not have to pay the 10% of land value? But if developing the property into 3 or 4 blocks in such a way as to enable the property to be further cut into smaller areas, then would we have to pay the price? Is that understanding correct?
That's a yes, Director Bright, I think, is it?
Yes, through Mr. Mayor. It's where the current Department of Planning have got an issue as well, because they've got at the moment a 5-lot cutoff. So they sometimes deal with an issue where a development or a subdivider shows 4 lots and then a large balanced lot that can be further subdivided. If it's obvious, for example, if they are looking to house a dwelling on a property, so they therefore need 1 large lot and 1 smaller lot, it's a 2-lot subdivision, this policy wouldn't apply. If the subdivision proposal had 1 very large lot with a lot more potential and a small lot at the front, then that would be a judgment call from the Commission as to whether that would apply. So it would have to be a case-by-case basis on that particular hypothetical scenario.
Councillor Jacobs, anything further?
Yeah, I do have a few more.
Yep, go ahead.
Would it be possible perhaps to, next week, I don't know, CM, would it be possible to clause in to say would exempt, homeowners in that area that live for a certain amount of time? Would that be legally or legislatively possible to do that?
Director.
It would be difficult because we'd have to find out the settlement of every property. And as I said before, really all the ground rules have only recently changed with the density codings being introduced that have completely changed, I guess, the landscape. So look, it'd be very unusual that we would then single out historic landowners versus new landowners, and I don't think the Commission would give weight to a policy that worked on that basis.
Thank you. Councillor Jesse Jacobs.
Yeah, I've got one or two more. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Yep, go ahead.
Have we, in short, missed the bus on this policy? If you look at city suburbs like Bentley, particularly up towards Curtin, have we missed the bus? I mean, is this policy too little, too late? And that would lead into a second question. But yeah, have we essentially missed the bus on trying to capture value to put into POS and development?
We've only just upcoded a lot of that happening direct applied.
Yeah, and I guess that's the difference. And again, it's hard speaking about all four suburbs because they have got, you know, differences. But if you look at St James Bentley, a lot of the housing stock in that area, you know, can actually be redeveloped. So there's a lot of demand, a lot of potential for that, for those two suburbs. So we are, I guess, proposing the policy at a reasonable time. I think if you left this policy for another 5 years, then I would agree that you would have basically, there'd be probably no point because a lot of that subdivision activity is going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years. So that's what I'm saying. The timing of this is probably about right. Any further, you know, if it's not adopted now, but adopted in 10 years, you probably are missing a fair chunk and may not actually be worth it.
Councillor Jacobs.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Are we essentially punishing late movers? So people that moved early obviously potentially would not have this 10%, but if you sat on it, would there be, we can't obviously backdate it. That's clear. We can't do that. We can only say from this date forward. So in a sense, is that in your opinion are we punishing the people that have not?
Director, I don't think that's a question that that calls for speculation. I don't think the director can comment whether we're punishing people. Can I ask you to perhaps rephrase it? I think I know what you mean, Jesse, but you would understand that the director can't make a comment publicly about whether he feels we're punishing people.
Okay, well, I'll put it this way: if I was a person in one of those four suburbs, and I've done the development a year ago, I didn't have to pay 10%. Now, if I do it perhaps in a year's time, I have to pay the 10%. So there would be a massive difference between someone who says, you know what, I don't want to develop it, I'm going to sit on it. And maybe they're more elderly, maybe they're not up to things. They're not first movers. So in, international relations and things like that, we call the first mover advantage. I'm just sort of thinking about the people that aren't really up to all, with all the information. They might sit on things for quite a long time. I mean, would they be disadvantaged because they've sat on it for too long?
I'm not sure if anyone else is getting distorted sound. I didn't really hear much of the end of that.
I think I've got the general thrust of it, Mr.
Can you just make a broad statement?
Yeah, look, I think perhaps if there was no change in the scheme and it was the same residential coding and there was no change between pre-2020 and post-2020, then I could see the argument that one could make that a lot of the suburb would have then been developed and would only be the last 20-30% possibly that get caught up. But I guess speaking more broadly, given there is a lot of potential that has been created through the infill targets that the state has imposed upon us, there's some landowners that are available or are able to get quite a significant lot yield or unit yield on their properties that before 2020 they wouldn't have been able to do. So from that perspective, I'm a lot more comfortable in relation to that question.
Can I jump in there, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, you can.
It follows on directly from what Director Bright has said.
Yeah, go ahead. Deputy Mayor?
So, I mean, you make those comments about the changes between a few years ago and now. And I mean, I've never seen one of your planning reports talk about property values before. You generally stay away from it. But LPS 42 didn't really make massive changes to the suburbs of Rossmoorn and Shelley. There was intensifications along a couple of transport routes and around shopping centres, but the most of Rossmoorn and Shelley wasn't touched in terms of upcoding. So I guess there's no real argument there that this Rossmoorn and Shelley should be incorporated, and this is the time to do that. In fact, the majority, looking at the intensification map,
I just need a question, Deputy
of
Mayor.
Shelley. Yeah, I'm just asking him to clarify on his last question based on the fact that Rossmoorn and Shelley hasn't really been upcoded. And a lot of the upcoding is actually on the Riverton side of Shelley, on that part of other side of Leach Highway. So how will that benefit? How will that provide more access of POS for Rossmoorn and Shelley?
I'll come straight back to you, Councillor Jacobs. Yep. Director.
I understand the question. Yeah, in terms of LPS 42, you're right. A lot of the density increases that were brought in were more around local centres and long transport corridors. There was an earlier amendment which came in prior to LPS 42, which upcoded the base coding from R17.5 to R20. So that has meant that some properties caught up in that have got further subdivision potential. But yeah, I take your point about the synergies between Bentley St James and Rossmoorn and Shelley are a little different in that context.
And just to clarify, is there a reason why this policy didn't get brought in conjunction with LPS 42 so that they actually mirrored one another directly and people didn't get used to the changes in upcoding and then subsequently have a policy like this come through?
Director?
Yes, we have, I think the policy was brought up in 2021. It's obviously been a fair lag between the initial introduction to council and its final consideration. But there was a lot of discussion internally as to how we could progress this issue. We looked at a number of other local governments in terms of how they did it. We felt this was the best way forward. In hindsight, maybe it should have been progressed a year earlier, but given the amount of strategic planning work we were doing, it was certainly a priority, but it obviously fell behind a couple of others.
Thank you.
Just lastly, last question, Mr. Mayor. Paragraph 40 talks about Shelley and the Shelley foreshore and so forth, and basically one of the reasons it says it wasn't included is potentially because it's not usable for active space. Given it's used as like for park runs, running, cyclists, kayaks entry, what is the exact definition of active space? What do you need to actively do versus what passively exercise? Why is running and those sorts of exercises not considered active?
Director?
Yeah, there's probably a couple of points there. So, there is a active use is more commonly known as an area of public open space where potentially you can kick a ball or do those sort of social sports or social activities. Passive space is generally more those areas that are more conservation. I've got lots of more vegetation due to the size or shape. It's more difficult to do those more social gatherings or social sports. And in terms of why it wasn't included in the analysis, that's a requirement of the state government that in terms of your POS analysis for these suburbs, you should not include foreshore reserves. Understand what you're saying. Practically though, for all intents and purposes, it's a valued piece of land that is utilised by the community. So it's a technicality that the Commission requires that local planning, local public open space strategies should not include those foreshore areas.
Councillor Jacobs, let's go back to you quickly, and then Councillor Singh had his hand
Thanks,
up.
Mr.
Councillor
Mayor.
Jacobs.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just got one more. Now, this one I think has been touched on by one or two other councillors, but let's just say there's a political decision that the timing's not right. You've got inflation. You've had COVID for 2 years. We just think that the residents might not be too flash on this. So we make a political decision and we say no. Where does that leave us? Do we have a capacity to rejig or to take another plan to make sure that these suburbs have the appropriate, maybe not the Rolls Royce, but maybe have something. Is there a leeway, Director, to sort of rejig if we can't get the 10% up?
I know it's not your intention, but I would, as the chair, just comment that we don't make political decisions here. We've got a code of conduct that prevents us from working in a manner that is political. We need to do what's best for the residents of the City of Canning. So I know that's probably not what you meant, but it didn't quite come out quite right, I think, Jess.
I can rephrase it for you if you want to. I can rephrase it.
I think we got the gist of it, but I just wanted to make the point we don't make political.
I just want to say
decisions.
if there was a decision made at next OCM not to endorse this motion for various reasons, where does that leave us with our plan?
Okay, Director.
Look, as I say, we're putting this report up to council because it was a recommendation of the public open space strategy. But at the end of the day, it's totally in council's remit. If council believes that it doesn't want to pursue this option for a number of reasons, and there are some very valid reasons, we appreciate that. Then really the only other option is either to upgrade the existing POS to a very high standard, but again, you're not really resolving the access to large amounts of open space, or council through its long-term financial plan, the next iteration, looks at an annual allocation, for example, that it can put towards a citywide reserve to then spend on land acquisition. So that's another option if council didn't want to pursue getting some contribution from the development process.
A good question. Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Director Bride, another question for you. I understand you have explained that WAPC is the body who will mandate whether the 10% contribution should be made or not based on council's recommendations. We can ask for it, but they may reject it. The high probability that they will impose it in the 4 suburbs we have mentioned is because we can present to them that there is a lack of public open space. So for the other suburbs, which I'm still trying to be convinced that they do not need it, I'm reading the policy, the WAPC policy DC 2.3, and the policy says acceptable expenditure for cash in lieu funds may be for clearing, seating, earthworks, spectator cover, grass planting, toilets, landscaping, change rooms, reticulation, lighting, play equipment, pathways, fencing, walking trails, car parking, and signs. The idea is there are so many items which our city can make up a case for suburb X, Y, Z that all these items are lacking in these suburbs, and we are going to use these 10% subdivision funds in these suburbs for these items, while we're going to use in Bentley and others for buying land, which is the main purpose. But my point here is, can we not make a good enough space to have this policy applied to everyone? And every suburb has its own needs met by these funds. Some suburbs will use those funds.
Councillor Singh, I'd have to say, you've already asked this question. In fact, you asked it, I think, twice. You had a comprehensive response from the director. I think we just have to accept it. He's saying that it can't be applied, and he gave reasons for that. I'm not sure going back and asking him the same question again is going to elicit a different answer. Might be easier maybe to meet with the director during the week and discuss it in greater length, and I'm sure he'd provide that time, but you have actually asked this exact same question.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, I'm just...
I don't want to be rude, but we'll be here all night. I know you're not quite... You're passionate about it.
That's
I can see that.
I understand. I'm just not convinced. I'm looking for more and more information, but I take your point. We'll be here all night. I'm happy to talk to Director.
I'm happy to be here all night.
No, I understand. Look, I'm honestly, I do believe I'm asking this similar question, but I'm not getting the information because every policy, City of Cosmos examples, everything is pointing towards, yes, this can be done. So I'm really looking forward to be proved wrong that this can't be done, so that I can make an easy decision for voting next week. But that's my intention for asking these questions.
Director
but
Bride,
I understand.
Yeah, look,
go on.
Yeah, I was going to say, that look, if Councillor, if you want to move an amendment to the policy to include all suburbs of the city that contributes 3 lots or contributes public open space for 3 lots or more, that's certainly an amendment you can put forward. And there's no, it's not illegal. to do that. It'll just be basically, my belief is that the commission would, if we asked for a contribution for a 3-lot subdivision in Parkwood or Canning Vale, they would say, why are you asking for a contribution for a 3 to 5 lot subdivision in Parkwood when your strategy says there's enough land in Parkwood? I know what you're saying about the capital improvements, but that really is the expectation for capital improvements to parks is that it is provided through the rate base, unless there is in those particular areas, like I said, Bentley, St James, Shelley and Ross Point, it can be used for significant upgrades to parkland. But outside of that, the commission would be making the point that you've already got enough open space. If you want to upgrade the park, you use your own municipal funds.
Thank you, Director Bride.
Thank you. Councillors, any other questions, any further questions on this item before we move on to the next item? Thank you, councillors, and thank you for your questions. We will now move on to CD 007 of 22, the adoption of local development plan for 136 to 138 Station Street. That's actually lots 9 to 12 in East Caddington. The officer's recommendation is the council adopts the local development plan, etc., etc. It's on page 63 of the agenda and is also on screen. Any questions in relation to that item? Councillor Bain.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was wondering if the developer had submitted a local tree retention strategy for that lot.
Director Bride, are you aware, or can you find out?
Through Mr. Mayor, I'll take that one on notice. There is a copy of the West Australian Planning Commission decision. If you have a look at the, I believe it's attachment 2. So if there's not a condition, because this is obviously going back to sort of early last year. But there is a condition 10, which talks about prior to commencement of subdivisional works, measures being undertaken to identify any vegetation on the site worthy of retention, including any potential habitat or foraging trees. So there is a requirement there that they have to convince the city that they have retained vegetation that's worthy of consideration that can't be saved from subdivisional works.
Councillor Bain.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So should they not submit that along with their development plan?
Yes, they have to. So prior to undertaking any subdivisional works, they have to identify all the vegetation on site worthy of retention. So if they commence any activity without addressing that condition and identifying the vegetation on site and how it can be retained, they can't start subdivisional works.
Anything further, Councillor Bain?
No, so the city is awaiting that strategy anyway and applying LPO 9.
Yes, so at the moment they've got subdivision approval, and this is one of the conditions. The LDP is one of the requirements to allow them to clear the subdivision. So in terms of development on those lots, once the subdivision occurs, they'll obviously be single lots. So you're looking at 280 square metre lots. It's LPO 9 obviously has a rate of a tree rate of 1 per 450 square metres. So yeah, I'd have to get back to you on that as to whether the end lot, which is quite small, would be affected by LPO 9. I'll chase it up for you.
You okay if the director gets back to you on that, Mark? Thank you. I can see you nodding there. Thank you very much. Any other questions on that item, councillors, before we move past it? Thank you. There's no further questions. We'll move to the page over. We're moving to EN 002 of 22. The title of that report is Request 09/2021 for turf renovations and maintenance services. The responsible officer being Mr. Dion Johnson, the Acting Director of Canning Environment. The recommendation for this item is on page 79 of the agenda and is also on screen right now. And I can just let you know that the officer's recommendation in part 2 should actually read, authorises the Chief Executive Officer to execute the contract documents, not to contract the documents. Clearly, he can't do that. So that will be amended for the OCM, but it's to execute the contract documents. Mr. Johnson, I believe that that's correct. Is that right?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
Thank you. Councillors, any questions on that matter? Councillor Holland, yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All our lawn mowing business, is that all contracted out now?
Mr. Johnson?
All of it?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, it's not. It's predominantly done in-house. What we don't do is the renovation side of turf management.
Could you repeat that? I didn't get that, sorry.
The renovation side, can you explain that?
Yeah, so predominantly we do all the mowing in-house, but it's the renovations that we outsource to an external provider who has the necessary equipment and resources to be able to do it. The equipment they use is really expensive, and it would sit around for us for months on end and not used. So it's a far more efficient and cheaper option to use a contractor.
What do you mean by renovations?
So renovations is aerating the turf, dirty mowing, doing sort of rejuvenation of the turf ready for the next season of sport.
Thank you. Any other questions on that item, councillors? Thank you. We'll move past it then to EN 004 of 22. That's the review of parking controls in Rhonda Avenue in Willetton. The officer's recommendation is on screen. It's also on page 89 of this evening's agenda. Any questions on that item there, councillors? No questions. Thank you. We'll move on to the next item then, and that will be EN 005 of 22. It's a motion carried at the 2022 AGM of electors, naming of public area of Shelley Foreshore as the Dr. Michael Mick Reserve or Park. We have already read to the meeting disclosures by Councillor Spencer Teo and also Councillor Singh in relation to that. No need to repeat those, they're on the public record. The officer's recommendation is on page 95 of the agenda and is on screen. Any questions in relation to that matter? No
yeah,
question.
I do, Mr. Mayor.
Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
In regard to paragraph 34, whilst we refer to it as the Rossmore Shelley Foreshore, is that its official name with Landgate?
Mr. Johnson, is that the official Landgate name?
I don't believe it is, but I'll need to take that on notice and
take that on notice, Deputy Mayor. We'll get back to you on that one. Anything
the
else?
Context of my question is about needing to go through a consultation process for the Rossmore Foreshore if we subsequently name the Shelley one. I was just wondering, given that it doesn't actually, if it doesn't have an official name, whether that's still relevant.
Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, certainly would still, sorry, am I on screen? Yeah, sorry, certainly would still need to do a consultation. It's a requirement of the Geographical Names Committee. So there's also a number of lots along the Shelley Rossmore Foreshore. So depending exactly where the location of the potential renaming would still have to do a lot of consultation.
Sorry, I'm not, just to clarify, I'm not talking about overall consultation. I'm just, I haven't got it in front of me, but the report basically spoke about needing to do consultation for the Rossmore part, should it be adopted, given that it's the Rossmore Shelley Foreshore. I was just wondering if that's actually required, if there's no official name of the Rossmore Foreshore.
I'll need to take that on notice, but I suspect we will still need to.
And just another question. So the electors notice a motion referred to the public area of Shelley Foreshore to be named as Dr. Michael Mick Reserve or Park. Staff obviously have interpreted that as the area from 5th to Shelley Bridge. Is this correct? And not like just the Shelley Beach Park or anything, is the entire foreshore?
Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, correct. That's the way we have interpreted it.
So would that potentially be confusing, given that the foreshore actually incorporates a number of reserves and parks, Shelley Beach Park, Zenith Park, Park Beach, close? Wouldn't a proposal of renaming the whole foreshore as a park or reserve then confuse people about the actual parks and reserve on the foreshore?
Mr. Johnson?
Yes, there's potential for that.
And given the number of issues, bureaucratic, different jurisdictions and that, as part of this process, if council adopts it, would council look potentially at other options of recognition, with the city, sorry, look at other potential areas of recognition? I've spoken previously about Fifth Park, given that's where Dr. Leakius lived, and doesn't have a name. Will other examples be looked at, or is it solely about looking at this foreshore with the officer recommendation as it is?
Look, we're responding to the electors' motion. So if elected members or council wish to certainly make an amendment, then there's certainly many options that we could look at.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, anything further? No, thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Holland? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just querying, actually, I suppose, the logistics of this, because part of the park, I'm thinking of jurisdictional boundaries here, because as you get closer to the water, it becomes, the land's not ours, and it becomes part of the Canning River Authority or whatever it is. So won't that come under several jurisdictions on who can actually change a name?
Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Holland, absolutely. It's a very complicated space, the foreshore. Would certainly need BDCA support, and then ultimately the Geographical Names Committee through Landgate would be supported as well.
Which is not just Landgate, it need to be the actual government as well as the other departments as well. Is that correct?
Certainly there's a number of government agencies and departments that would need to go through.
Wouldn't it, then the final question, which will go on a little bit from from the Deputy Mayor, wouldn't it be a far easier project to name a park that's City of Canning land?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, it would be a lot easier, and it's certainly up to council how you'd like to proceed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jacobs.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I believe that we did maybe a year or two ago, there was potential to rename a park. It was floated, the idea was floated in discussions, but I think what came back from Landgate was that if you can't change the name, but you add a name. So what I'm hearing, would there be a potential to say Shelley Foreshore / Dr. Michael Leakius Park? Is that what's probably going to happen?
Mr. Johnson?
I can't comment on what might happen, but certainly there's opportunities to have official and unofficial names for parks and other open spaces. So certainly we can explore that when we bring the report back to council in likely around July, August this year.
Thank you, councillors. Any further questions before we move on? Thank you. We'll move on to EN 006 of 22. It's regarding motion again from the 2022 AGM of electors, traffic concerns at the intersection of Manning and Bungaree Roads in Wilson. The recommendation is on page 103 of tonight's agenda and is also on screen. Any questions, councillors? Sorry, any questions? I've only just got your faces up on screen. Mr. Bain, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Which OCM does the city anticipate the report will be presented to council? Thank you.
Mr. Johnson, when do you anticipate the report coming back?
I suspect it'll take a few months to certainly arrange and complete the audit, and just because of the timing of the agendas, I suspect it'll be at least two council meetings away.
A number of council meetings away, Councillor Bain, but it's on work in progress. Any further questions, councillors? Thank you. We'll then move on to the next item, being EN 008 of 22, installation of traffic management devices, Granville Way in Willerton, post-consultation. The recommendation is on page 107 of the agenda and is on screen. And the recommendation is simply that council notes the feedback, authorises the interim chief executive officer to proceed with the delivery of the traffic management treatments along Granville Way. Any questions on that matter? None, thank you. We'll move on to the next item, being CO 001 of 22, the responsible officer being Dr. Sarah McQuaid, the Director of Canning Community. The title of this report being Motion Carried at the 2022 AGM of Electors, CCTV Partnership Program. Councillor Singh has already made a disclosure in relation to an impartiality declaration interest. No need for that to be reread to the meeting. It's already on the public record. The officer's recommendation is on page 116 of the agenda and is also on screen. Councillors, do you have any questions in relation to that matter? Thank you. We'll move on then to CO 002 of 22. Motion carried at the 2022 AGM of Electors. Undertake review of facilities at Ferndale Reserve. The recommendation is on page 120 of the agenda and is also on screen. Any questions in relation to that matter? Just waiting for all your faces to come up on screen. Thank you, Councillor Bain.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just wondering, it's unclear as to why in the officer's recommendation it didn't note the concerns of the users of the facilities at Ferndale Reserve.
Director Dr. McQuaid, can I ask you please to comment on that from Councillor Bain? Did you hear that question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. We didn't note the club's concerns in the officer recommendation simply because we understand where that is at, and the response is that we will undertake the work to undertake a review of that site and understand where the issues are and feed that into a proposed plan for future use of that site.
Thank you. Councillor Bain, it's in the report, I think, certainly on the public record. Councillor Bain.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the city can confirm that an on-site meeting will go ahead as requested by the clubs?
Will an on-site meeting be part of that consultation, Director McQuaid? I can see you nodding.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. As per paragraph 6, consultation with key internal and external stakeholders will be undertaken, as it will be undertaken for all reserves that will be encapsulated as part of the community infrastructure plan.
That's a yes, Councillor Bain. Anything further?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bain. Any other questions on Deputy Mayor?
Can I just clarify why a meeting isn't part of the recommendation and more short-term to see if there's short-term solutions to some of these issues? I say that in the context that council obviously asked for a community infrastructure plan in 2016, and there was a lot of work done and it never really went anywhere. And so if we're just waiting for it to be incorporated as part of a broader holistic plan, when our community groups actually come with us and ask for a meeting on site, why it's not being done to see if there's any of those short-term solutions that might be able to be implemented rather than a just as part of a bigger site renewal.
Dr. McQuaid.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yes, a number of reasons why we've recommended that we follow it through with the community infrastructure plan. Firstly, so that council are presented with a holistic view. As you're aware, we have a number of issues across multiple reserves within the city of Canning in terms of capacity, club facilities, change rooms, storage, etc. Ferndale Reserve is no different to any other reserve in that fact. We are already undertaking the work and we'll be presenting the first of the SIBs to council at the end of April. So the work to meet with the clubs and to ascertain their desires for the future of that reserve is going to be happening in a timely fashion. And it is our intent to present to you an actual detailed site plan with possible future developments. Furthermore, as you're also aware, we have a lack of funds to actually undertake any works at this point in time. And for council to make a decision on where the priorities are going to lie for priority of upgraded infrastructure across a number of our facilities, we felt it was the best option was to present this as a holistic view. That's not to say that council won't prioritise this reserve over other reserves.
Deputy Mayor? Okay, any further questions, councillors, on that matter? Thank you. We'll move on to CO 003 of 22. The item title is, the report title is late item. CSR FF Small Grants 2022 ground application, Purley Park Half Court. And the recommendation is on page 2 of the late item agenda and is on screen. Any questions in relation to that matter, councillors? Thank you. We then shall move on to the next item. We move to item 8, notices of motion for consideration at the next ordinary council meeting. There are none. Urgent business, there is none. Confidential matters, we do have a confidential matter to discuss this evening. For those tuned in at home, this is the last item on tonight's agenda. It will be dealt with under confidential cover by the council. The live streaming on the website will now end in order for council to consider the confidential